Hi, good afternoon. A couple of you, as you can tell, I don't come from around here. I come from Chicago, you can tell from the accent. A couple of you come here because I asked you to, so thank you for doing that. Made up the numbers. As you saw, we're talking about landing more sales, and my section's about relationship engagement, how to engage better with partners, how to make better relationships. So first, before I do that, he did a good job of coming up with a name. ConnXN, you see, ConnXN. It's a play on words, connection. I do customer relationship mapping, and I'll let you read this. You can probably read it quicker than I can, and with my accent, you'll probably understand it easier if you read it than if I do. That's pretty much what I do. I try and help, and I've been working with, I overheard a couple of ladies earlier. I escaped corporate as well, so, you know, welcome to the club. Which sometimes I think is great, and other times I'm like, maybe I missed that salary. But quickly about me, and I'll do this very briefly. I call it the numbers game. So I've got about 7 numbers here, I think, if I remember rightly. Yeah, 7 numbers. And we'll get over my introduction and we can get on to the meat of what I've come here to talk to you about, and hopefully you'll find interesting. The first number, 87, is not my age. Just make that clear. Close, but not there. It's the number of countries I've traveled to. It's not the number I've worked in, but pretty close. 8 is the number of countries I've actually lived in. And you can see those signify where I've lived. And for those that are geographically challenged, by the way, I've color-coded it for you, okay? So I started, as you can see, in England, and then worked my way south to the Middle East because I got fed up with the weather. And then it got a bit too hot down there, so moved back up into Central Europe, and then came over here to the States. And I came to Chicago in 2008. So what brought me to Minnesota? I married a Minnesotan, and they all drag you back here, right? It's amazing. How does that work? So anyway, 6 are the brands I've worked with. I started with chocolate, Cadbury's. I moved quickly to beer, far more interesting. On to cheese. And I went to Coca-Cola, spent about 21 years of my career with Coke. Actually 7 years with them, 6 years with Marlboro, and then Coke dragged me back again, and I spent the next 15 years with Coke again, working on the McDonald's business. So I've worked with some pretty big brands. Anybody spot anything that's interesting about these brands? Sorry? Global products, right? What else? What's... Right, sorry? Right, say again? Very good. I like that. Vices, yeah, right. Beer, alcohol. Cigarettes, cancer. Coke, McDonald's, obesity. Right. So that's pretty much sums up my brand career. Anyway, moving on to 4. These are the companies I now work for. Not quite so evil. Well, not quite. Anyway, at least there's one that's a fantastic organisation. So and I help them do their mission and strategy. The next 4 is for the jobs that I've held. I started with account servicing. I moved on to consumer marketing. By the way, the keep calm is just, you know, so I can remember my heritage. It makes me feel good. And then I moved on to general management. And of course, now I've ended up in the last 3 years being a consultant. It's the biggest cup. The 2 is for 2 things that I've actually done while I've been a consultant in the last 3 years. One is to produce and get out a book. It was published in December, and then my app, which follows the whole relationship roadmap, which I'll take you through very briefly, is on both the Apple Store and Android. Google Play. The last number is for the family, 5. That is not the 5. This guy here is trying to plunge us into the rocks, actually. It's got nothing to do with us. But you'll see that the trepidation in the male side of the boat, and on the other side, the women are just loving it. So probably tells you about the psychology of our family a little bit. And then this guy, my oldest son, lives in Holland, and he's literally a space cadet, works for the space. There is a space program in Europe, actually, believe it or not. They don't put a lot of rockets up there, but they study it. Okay, so today, so that's the sort of bit about me. 4 things. I want to take you through the objectives of what I would like to communicate to you and that you may hopefully find interesting. I've got some thought starters which get you going the relationship way, if you like. Then we'll get into the meat of the subject, which is 6 steps to actually doing a customer relationship plan. And then I've got some closing thoughts, which are very, very brief, 3 slides. So let's talk about the objectives. I always describe understanding relationships like a minefield, both existing relationships, and even if you're on your own, trying to understand how to get into a new company and who are the real decision makers can be a minefield. If you're looking after a large account like I was for McDonald's for Coca-Cola, again, a minefield. You've got to find out who the right decision makers are. The people who often say they are not, which is why they say they are, because they want to pretend they are. So you've got to find out really who are the right people you should be talking to, so we can spend our time efficiently. There's a study done on sociology and relationships that says you can't actually hold any more personal relationships than about 150. If that's true, we better all make sure we're using our time efficiently and spending it with the right people. So hopefully I'll help you manage through that minefield a little bit, and I'll give you some skills, knowledge and tool experience, at least ideas. I like to think of myself as the guide for the hero. He's probably about my age actually, so I'm probably a good guide for Luke there. And any good guide helps that hero through the minefield. So what's in it for you guys? What are you sitting here for and listening to me? I'd suggest to you at the end of this that there's 4 things I can probably have helped you at least think about. You could have a tool that helps you decide where to best focus on your time and efforts. You could actually start measuring your relationship progress. You could change your focus easily. You know, people change quickly in today's world. It's not just the digital world, but people move jobs, change very rapidly now, and we need to keep track of that. And then you can ensure management is aligned. If you've got a management structure, you want to make sure that you've got the right coverage in that account and they know that you're doing the right job. So here's some thought starters. I've seen a lot of business plans written in my career. I've got a business plan as owner of my company. I'm sure you guys have. If you haven't, I'd recommend you do. I don't always achieve it, but at least I've got a target to aim at. One of the things that is missing in any business plan, I've written a lot for Coca-Cola and Philip Morris, we never talk about the people we've got to do the business with. So you can write the best strategy in the world, but unless you've addressed who are the decision makers that you've got to work with, you don't have a business plan. So that's one of the things that I work with companies on. I also suggest to you that building relationships is a strategic process. It's not a transactional process, which a lot of us do. I know Jack, he plays golf, let's go up, he's a good guy, and he'll probably give me the business. You know what? Today we can't do that sort of thing. We've got to be much more strategic about who we're aiming for and who we're going to talk to and how we're going to talk to them. I suggest we need to understand more about the customer's notion. Now, it's something I write about in the book, but the customer's notion is very simply, what is the customer's point of view about not just business, but their personal life, where their career is, what are they trying to achieve? And we can often help them with that by adding more value to the relationship. This guy down the bottom right-hand corner, anybody heard of Charles Battle? Anybody? I'm not surprised if you haven't, by the way. Okay. Charles Battle actually brought the Olympic Games to Atlanta in 1996. He was the chairman of the committee down there. And he did it in a very different way than normal, which is hence I'm showing this quote. The IOCs used to descend on a city as they were about to get the Olympics and used to have loads of gifts given to them. And he said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to take these people into our homes and show them Southern hospitality, which is probably surprised they even got the Olympics given that. But anyway, they had them into their homes, entertained them, and did a very different type of relationship building. He's now working on getting the Olympic Games in 2000 or something, 8 I think, into Korea. 2 other thoughts before I get into the meat. I wrote an article on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago called Warning, What CRM Can't Do. Now, this wasn't a go at CRM. I use one myself. I think CRM's great. Is it the right title, CRM? Is it a relationship manager? No, it's not. It's a data manager. All it does is put data in one place, which most sales guys hate, by the way, because all it is entering data in and putting targets in, which you never reach. So CRM's great, but it's been blown out of proportion in terms of what it can do. It won't manage your relationships. Sorry, that's my experience. What I do is build on CRM, and you'll see, I think, a little bit about how I do that. So again, I'm not hammering CRM, I'm just saying we need to understand what it does. It's not the answer to everything. And then the last thought starter is, you know, happy customers equals sales in an ideal world. All right, let's get into the meat of what I wanted to take you through, and really was part of why I think Pat saw my role in this. And I call it six steps of a customer relationship plan. And it's a process that I go through. I'm not trying to sell the book, honestly, otherwise you'd see a table full of them here, right? But I do refer to the book because it's the way that I managed to get everything down in one place. But the 6 steps I'm going to walk you through, but it starts with understanding where you are with the relationship. So what level of strength are they? And are you talking to the right people? And I'll give you some textures to that in a second. The next step is to identify, excuse me, I'll go back, is to identify the customer influences. So what roles do they play? What modes are they in? Are they career-wise in a good place? If they're in trouble mode, and I won't go into detail on this, but if they're in trouble mode, it's more likely you'll be able to help them. They're looking for help. If they're overconfident, they don't need you, all right? So it's good sometimes to go to that level and identify what mode they're in. The next piece is we start analysing what are the issues. So when you look at this map, and I'll show you what it looks like in a second, what are all the issues there? What are the things that really worry us about our relationships right now? And then we go to determining. We establish clear goals. Now most people get to the goals. They're like, yeah, I need to really improve that relationship. I need to move it from A to B. The piece they don't do is go to what I call the key initiatives, which is how are you going to change those relationships? You're not going to do it just by having dinner with them once a week. What else can you do to really change that relationship? And I'll show you some examples of goal setting and key initiatives in a minute. And then the last thing is, because, as I said earlier, things change so rapidly nowadays, we need to review and measure on a quarterly basis. The person we were dealing with last week may not be the person we will be dealing in 2 weeks' time, especially in the corporate world, right? Where they used to do 5-year plans in the corporate world, and they put them down to 3 because they realised nobody would be around in year 4, right? It's getting to the point they're not going to be around in year 3 either. Okay, so how does it work? There's 3 areas that you'll see me walk through. First, the mapping, then the customer strategy plan, which really is derived from the map. And then lastly, I've put in something which is a bit CRM-y. It's how you conduct a meeting, how you can take what you've decided you need to do in that plan and actually implement it in meetings with your customer. So, it starts with a map. I'll take you through it in a second. It goes to the strategy plan, and then it looks like this in the app for your meeting planner, for want of a better word. By the way, if you've got any questions, just dive in. All right, just throw them at me. Might not be able to answer them, but I'll have a go. So when you log in, and by the way, I don't want this to be an app technology-driven thing. It just is my way of helping take you through the process. Okay. Originally, we did this in spreadsheets until I derived this app. It's got a bit of administrative. You think CRM's administratively burdened? Try doing this on an Excel spreadsheet. It's even more administratively burdensome. This makes it very easy. So you log in, you go to that page, and guess what? There's those 3 things I was telling you about at the top. And then you click on relationship map, and guess what you see? Yeah, relationship map. That's a surprise. So here what you see is the color coding. So here would be your company, and it could be, I've got a couple of people using this at the moment who are like me. They're their own company, but they're trying to crack a couple of companies, and they're using, I've given them a sandbox to play in just to see how they use it. And in fact, what may transpire is I'll be doing a light version of this, so that small business owners have got a smaller, less, this is like the Rolls Royce. Maybe we need to be looking at the Mini, okay? So here you grade your relationships. There's some, and I won't go into detail, but down here there's a legend for what they are. And when it says strong, good, or work, it's not one of those. For each of the companies I work with, which you saw earlier, we have a very robust classification or definition for what a good, strong, or weak relationship is. Otherwise, it's just, you just put a pin in it, right? As you move along the map, you move to this. You start getting into the roles. You remember I referred to it earlier, so you've got the titles of the people here. You'll see some, here's the title. You've got his role, and again, without going into detail, B means budget, U as a user, G is a gatekeeper. You go into their modes as whether they're overconfident, you go into influences, and you go into their support. So you start with how good your relationship is, and then you start looking at the roles these people play. Nobody glazing over yet. All with me? Okay. So if I brought it alive, this is kind of how it would look. If you started putting faces in there, what you've got is the players in your own company, the players at your customer, and you've got understanding about what they do at that company, and then you start grading your relationships. Okay? Does that help bring it alive a bit? Now, when you've looked at that situation, it's like, what's wrong with it? And if I go back a slide, probably two, well, let's go to that one. You know, one of the things here could be, this is a critical relationship here, hence the asterisk, hence the exclamation mark. If it's critical relationship, it better be green. Critical means without that relationship being at least good, possibly better, you would not be able to do business with that company, either at the level you are or at all. So that immediately tells me that's got to be fixed. And then you can see some other things from what roles they are and what modes they're in as to what you need to fix. When you've decided what you need to fix, you put them into a situation summary. So here's some examples. We have no relationships with Johnny Holly above, a red rating and is a gatekeeper. Angela Richards is a user and a budget decision influence and is critical, but we only have a good relationship, and so on. So you define, it's like a shopping list, right? You just walk down, what are all the issues you got? When you've done that, you decide what your goals must be. So I told you I'd show you some examples. Here's one here. We moved John Grisham, lovely author, love him. Moved John Grisham's relationship with John Holly from red to yellow by the end of third quarter. It's a smart one. It's obvious. We know who it is. We know we've got to move the relationship from what to what, and we know by when. Michael to establish a red relationship with Eddie by end second quarter. Now the trick becomes, as I said earlier, it's not setting the goals. It's how you're going to do that. How are you going to move that needle? So underneath you'll see there's three key initiatives to match that one goal. So I'm going to invite John Holly to a business plan meeting in the first quarter. I'm going to invite John Holly to review with an agency and sports event and dinner in the second quarter. I'm going to book a round table with Jeffrey Archer and Daniel Silver, that should be interesting, between these two events, aimed for May. Very specific, very relevant, and will move the needle if you do it properly. And then you see, without going into detail, you'll see that there's another three goals to match those. And then so on, the page would go down until you've exhausted the number of key initiatives you think are necessary to meet those goals. The last piece of the app really is a client preparation grid. And you'll see here I'm following the 6 steps. We're round to here now. And this is when you decide, okay, what's the client's notion? And here's an example. You go to a meeting, you know what you're trying to achieve in that meeting as part of this relationship map. You now need to plan it. Now, it's a bit of a hobby horse with me. Being in the corporate world, I probably attended more meetings. In fact, I estimated how many meetings I attended. It was something like 10,000. It was ridiculous, seriously. And half of them were useless. A third of them were forgetful. We don't plan meetings. Very few of them have agendas, and even fewer have action plans after the meetings. So nobody actually does anything. They walk away high-fiving, great meeting, and nothing ever happens. And particularly with customers, we don't evaluate how well the meeting has been unless they've given us a check. I mean, we've got to think further than that. So here's a client. So this is part of trying to help that process. So for example, here's a client's notion. John is very ambitious. He's not happy with his current role and feels he should be promoted. He has 2 kids close to college education. He's been with digital over 10 years. He needs some wins to help his career. Okay, I've set that one up slightly. What it says is if we can give him some value, he can reach some of his goals here. All right? He can move up and maybe get promoted if we can find some ways to bring value. Next piece of that is, before you go in, let's have a single marketing objective. Let's know exactly what we're trying to achieve in that meeting. So I want to convince John that if he commits at least 30% of his marketing dollars to the same amount as us, that we can deliver a marketing program that will exceed the sales targets. Very clear objective of what you want to achieve in that meeting. And then, that's not enough, because then we've got to say, well, wait a minute, what's our best action outcome? If we accept that that's probably, that is probably the ultimate and ideal, what can we get close to that? And then a minimal acceptable action. Now, let me ask you a question. Why would you have a minimal acceptable action? Anybody got any ideas? Why would you have a minimal in there? Because you've got a best, so why worry about it?
Because if you don't get to a certain point, there's no point in moving forward with the perfect goal. You haven't accomplished.
Absolutely. Because and you're absolutely. So there's one or two things happen. You either need to change your objective because it's not realistic, or you need to find another customer who's actually going to say yes, right? Because you're going to waste a lot of time otherwise. Yeah, good point. Thank you. And then, so just to wind down on this, I didn't want to go through every single detail. All the heavy lifting is done obviously on the web. And then, as I said to you earlier, it converts either onto you can change it on the run. Obviously, you can't see a map in the same way, but it takes each chunk of the map and moves it down like you look at a website on your phone now. It chunks it down into easy to read segments, so you can actually be changing that meeting thing before you go into the meeting. All right, a couple of closing thoughts. I got three, I think. All things being equal, people buy from their friends. And all things not being equal, they still buy from their friends. I firmly believe in that. Has anybody come across the book called Challenger Sale? Anybody? It's a bestseller. Cargill have been using it. I met somebody on a plane a few months ago, and they'd been putting their people through training on it. And it's before I bought it. And I said, what's it all about? And she said, well, building relationships is a thing of the past. You've got to challenge your customer now. That's what it's all about. I'm like, really? You know what I think my customer would do if I challenged them without having built a relationship? They'd throw me straight out of the door. You've got to have trust and respect before you can start challenging their thinking or bringing value to it. So that's the biggest piece of bullshit I've ever heard. By the way, probably noticed I don't hold back too much. Mark McCormick, by the way, does anybody know who he was? He formed, yeah, please, go ahead. Thank you, sir. And IMG was the biggest still one of the biggest agencies for sports personalities. He started off with, the golfers he started with? He started with Palmer. He started with the three, Palmer, Nicklaus, and Gary Player. And incredibly successful. If this is good enough for him, it's good enough for me. The other thing I'd like, another quote, I don't know whether you've read a guy called David Noah. He's an expert in relationships. And he says, and I used to use this on my desktop as my screensaver for a while, though most people agree that relationships are important, few actually bother to measure, quantify, or leverage them to their fullest potential. It's so true. I didn't do it, and companies I work with didn't do it, but I think I've learnt my lesson. So in summary, there's three areas that I try and help companies with, or individuals. I give them the skills from the 6-step process. I give them knowledge both in workshops and coaching. And then finally, I give them the tools of both the book and the app to be able to follow those 6 steps. And in keeping with the whole roadmap theme, thank you. And if you need any details or you'd like to get hold of me, I'll throw out some business cards probably anyway, but you can get hold of me through any of those 3 vehicles. I'm also on Twitter, obviously on LinkedIn, and on Google+. With that, I'd like to say thank you.